everybody. Welcome to Anatomy of an End, a podcast where we ask the question, what can we learn from the life of someone who died by suicide, and how can that help us prevent further suicide? We do this through the lens of forensic psychological autopsies conducted in real life in the field by my partner and co-host, D. Edward Tatum, who I know as Dana. Once again, I am unfamiliar with the individual whose story we'll be telling today, so I'll be listening and learning right along with y'all as the audience. And just as we've done in our previous episodes, we'll be answering some more audience questions at the end. I want to thank you so much for joining us here again today. I'm your host, Davis Henry. Let's get into it. Well, I'm glad we got to have a nice little mental health break there and listen to some music. This is it's actually the same day as our last episode, but we're going to be talking.
Don't say that.
It's tomorrow now. My bad. I was joking. It's tomorrow. I'm wearing different clothes. No, but we took a second to step back and regroup a little bit. But we have something. We have another psychological autopsy to present to y'all today that has a little bit of a different theme, a different through line going through it, right, Dana?
Yes, it's another one where I've picked out from ones I've done over the years. This is one in the private sector, and this one demonstrates a point that we all have to keep in mind, that sometimes when people are assumed to be better, they're actually not better, and there's reasons for it. In this case, there's a physiological and an emotional reason that this individual is not better. Let's call him Sam.
Okay, Sam.
Sam was a 28-year-old who, though had a lot of run-ins with the law, they were not due to the exploitation or aggression towards others. They were all due to his long-standing substance abuse that he endured.
Mm.
He came to my attention through his family, who honestly this time they came to my attention because the family was suing the substance abuse treatment center that where he took his life.
They were suing the substance abuse center.
Right. It was a private South Florida substance abuse treatment center. It was outpatient.
Does that happen a lot? I haven't really heard of this happening.
Sure,
it does.
It happens quite a bit. Yeah,
There's
an old saying when we look at suicide from a retrospective that, and this is sad to say, but when someone takes their life in their home with the family there in the next room, it's horrible. It's nobody's fault, but it's horrible when they take their life because they're homeless, living on an overpass. Maybe it's horrible, but it's tragic. It's really nobody's fault. When they take their life while in treatment, or take their life while in a facility, take their life while even locked up, it's somebody's fault.
Right, because they're all perfect. They're all supposed to be perfect at what they do and never make mistakes or overlook small details.
Exactly. And, and I get it, because people want answers, and this type of death, as we've said many times, is received in such a different manner than other types of death that people want answers, and a lot of finger pointing takes place. And even when it happens in a home, or there's still finger pointing amongst family and friends and so forth. So yeah, I get it. But
and at themselves, there's lots of guilt that is always born of these suicidal events.
Sure. People rack their brains wondering, what could I have done? But in this case, I was asked to do this and got to know the family, and it was tragic. Young person, losing their life to suicide. So he had a huge issue with opiates. And interestingly, at this time in South Florida,
very easy to get.
I mean, these
what year was this
clinics, again? This is 2010.
So right after the what was that family that was running there was a bunch of pain clinics that got shut down by the FBI around then.
This was Broward County.
Okay.
And at that time, we did a map. A colleague of mine and I did a map. There were more pain clinics than there were McDonald's or Walmarts
at
that time.
If y'all haven't heard anything about this, just you got to look into it. It is a wild story. There's some good FBI accounts out there, but this is it's wild stuff.
I've worked on cases that were related to these places. Now, for those who don't know, during the so-called opiate epidemic, the pain clinics that were popping up, they diagnosed, prescribed, and dispensed all in one stop. And when you drove by one of these places, it looked like a bread line from the Depression in the United States. People standing in a line around the building. The license plates in the parking lots would be from all over, eastern United States, Tennessee, Virginia, wherever, coming down there. Groups of people to all get to load up and get their pills. And there would be advertisements like in Thrifty Nickel or these shoppers papers.
Got pain?
Yeah. And it showed people smiling and beautiful people playing volleyball on the beach. Be rid of your pain and having fun. They didn't show the people that were really in line.
They didn't show the people driving 1,000 miles from Appalachia down to Florida to buy pills and then drive them back there to sell.
That's right. And there would be advertisements for physicians to work these places, guaranteeing $1,500 a day. And these are folks that would just sit and write a script all day long and sit in a chair and write a script. So these were pill mills. They were rampant. And folks like Sam, this young man, were obviously a part of that world, and we could say fall victim to it. We could say availed themselves to it, however you want to look at it. And the end result was that he was an addict, and it was incredibly difficult to break that addiction. So his family had some means and were able to put him in many, many different rehabs, both inpatient and outpatient. And, of course, he relapsed each time. But this last time was the worst. He had really been out on the street. They hadn't seen him in a long time. They couldn't find him. They finally did. He was so strung out on these intravenous opioids that, he was near death at that point just from running his body down so in this manner. He was hardly recognizable to them. They got him in an inpatient setting first, and he had to be medically detoxed. This is not something that, that everybody gets to do. Some people, it's just cold turkey. They don't have and they're very scared of it.
And you can you die from opioid withdrawal?
It's not death from it is not as prevalent as death from alcohol withdrawal.
But you can physically die of the withdrawal?
It depends on some other variables about the individual's physical resilience. I'm going to step out of my lane here, but
no, that's
physical resilience. I mean, there may be related issues with their hypertension, heart disease. There may be other things that can contribute to how the withdrawal process could hurt them. It can dehydrate them, obviously. And so if it's not in a controlled setting, they could really cause themselves a lot of damage that could result in death. For people that have the means, they can be medically detoxed, where they make it a lot easier for them, but yet it's still difficult. And most people who are addicts at that level, like Sam, they're not using the opiates to necessarily feel high. They're using the opiates to not get sick.
Go into withdrawals.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very scary thing.
Well, the only reason I was asking is because if anybody is listening who's been thinking about getting, stopping or trying to stop, I want to make sure they make a responsible decision if that is a risk.
Oh, yes. Please make a responsible decision, because don't underestimate the power of these drugs, but also don't overestimate your ability to have the resilience to withstand it. Mm-hmm. Try to get help and find some place that it can detox you safely. But nonetheless, he did have a place, and he went to it begrudgingly, and it was a 7 or 8 day detox where he went through the full cycle of detox that's common. The possible psychosis that happens, you have the sweats being tremulous and so forth. And he went through it. Now, here's where things, go wrong. You would think, wow, he detoxed successfully. He's all cleaned up now. He's not looking homeless. He's not looking so disheveled. He's coherent. He's not trying to get drugs. He's detoxed. He just finished it, and he came out the other end, without the drugs in his body. He's showered up, shaved, cleaned, new clothes. All right, Sam, you're looking good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Looked like he had really turned it all around.
Yes. He had been detoxed about 2 days. He had spoken to people. Now, remember, during the detox, he could be incoherent, screaming, he's mad. They don't want to talk. They're not friendly during detox, okay? This is a tough time, and they may take it out on other people, screaming, yelling, vomiting, a lot of going on there. Now, when it's over and they finally have rested and they look different, they look like the person you once knew, maybe. They're able to talk, able to say, wow, that was terrible. And they're no longer screaming and yelling, if that's part of their detox presentation. The screaming part is not for everybody. Nonetheless, a couple of days later, the family talked to him. They were encouraged. Sam, you made it. Now we just got to take it a day at a time. And all of those kind of conversations are going on. And Sam is compliant with everything, which is a big part of it. Because if we see somebody compliant with treatment, especially in substance abuse, we have the hopes that it's going to be successful.
Because they're showing that they have the desire to be better.
Right.
They want to improve.
They couldn't make him go through the detox. He agreed.
Right.
That was a big step. Yay. Right. I mean, he said he'll go in. He said he'd go through the detox. Thank goodness. He did go through the detox. He didn't leave against medical advice right in the middle of it like so many do. Mm-hmm. He completed. He saw his way through. Yes, we're making progress. Finally, right? And I just talked to him, and he sounds great. And, he's a little solemn, but he's been through a lot.
Yeah.
Those are the words they used. All right, here's what they didn't know.
Solemn, but he's been through a lot. That's
been through a lot. He's solemn. He's not the Sam they knew long before the drugs, but he is the Sam they haven't seen in a few years. He wasn't high. He wasn't trying to get high. He was clean and taken care of and eating and all these things.
That makes anything different, I guess, is good. And that when you're when you've been stuck in that cycle.
Well, there's a semblance of normality, right? And he stuck it out. He didn't quit through the detox.
Which is like, I think the hardest thing for people who are trying to kick a substance is that like your whole reward system is all messed up. Your whole life is built around the drug. So being able to look at getting out the other side of that as the reward, that's a hard thing to do for somebody that has a substance abuse problem. But being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel and abandoning the light at the other side of the tunnel, that's the drug addiction, that's the hardest part.
That's a great point, because that plays into where I'm going with this account of Sam's case. The family standpoint was that, what did they give him? What type of medication did they give him? Because post-detox, he was given an antidepressant medication and a low dose, what we call a subtherapeutic dose of an antipsychotic. And I say subtherapeutic, meaning at a certain dosage, this antipsychotic medication treats psychosis.
Right.
If you give it at a subdose of that, it's not treating psychosis, but it's thought to aid in the mood stabilization along with the antidepressant.
There's a couple of prescription medications that can kind of be used like this, where they're at lower doses. They do something almost not completely different, but it can be used for multiple different applications.
Right. And though they're in the category of antipsychotic, they're not treating psychosis at this particular low dose.
Right.
So there's a lot of pros and cons about that approach. So the family had some cons about it, and they were upset, and they thought that was contributing to what happened.
Oh,
and it may have, but that's not the whole picture. And here's the picture. He had spent many years an addict. Now, what is an addict that falls to the horror of addiction, like with the opiates? What do they do in life? They can change their mood instantly. You and I, and most of us, we go through life with ups and downs. We ride some out. The riding of some out takes longer some days than others. Sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes we build resilience and we skip right along. Sometimes we have great days, blah days, dull days, bad days. But we understand that. And
we allow ourselves to experience moods.
Right. We feel it. We experience it. We move forward, hopefully. For a person in addiction, especially this type of addiction, they can change their mood instantly, right? I use. And then any of those things I just described are not relevant because I'm going to be dominated by the synthetic feelings that are given to me through this opiate in this case. So Sam was that person. Now, what happens to a person over a number of years no longer has that ability to synthesize mood and understand mood and mitigate issues around mood or the mood itself, right? Through natural means or through just simply riding out a mood, right? Because a person who has the ability that's addicted and has the ability to get the substance that they need, well, why would they ride out a mood when they can change it instantly, right?
Yeah.
So,
you lose those tools when you're in that world for too long.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And in Sam's case, what was seen as improvement in his life, a big step forward, ending in a suicide, was completely counterintuitive to what the family and others and most people would think. Most thought that if he was going to kill himself, he would have done it prior to detox, or he would have done it while out there under an overpass or homeless or in the lowest part of his life. That's when it would happen.
Well, we're approaching a myth here. How many times have you heard if they were going to kill themselves, they would have done it already?
There you go. How about this? The other question, what does a suicidal person look like? A person who's cleaned up and just went through detox and is trying to get better, does that look like a suicidal person? Or how about this person who's living under an overpass with nothing, who's has
crying all the time.
Crying all the time. Their life has fallen apart. They can't get their drug. They're out there begging. Which one looks suicidal? To the family and to most people who fall into that myth, the guise of that myth, the person out in the street looks suicidal, and the person who was fortunate enough to get medical care, get cleaned up, get through detox safely, get into a program, right? They're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And therefore, suicide was impossible. How could this happen?
Well, because, I mean, maybe it starts with external factors. Maybe external factors lend themselves to your state of mind, but it always is inside, and you can't see that part of somebody.
You can't see it. So what I knew at that time was that the detox was just the first step. You see, what I had found out through 5 other psych autopsies I had done in that same county I was asked to do was that people who go through this opiate detox and benzodiazepine detox, though they go through it and they look better and sound better and are coherent and oriented to time, person, place, situation, they're going to go through a secondary emotional detox, meaning they're going to be facing a moods and depressive moods that they do not have the tools to combat and they're not ready for.
I think a lot of people experience that with any drug that changes your state of mind. You always have that secondary come down where it's usually long, it's more protracted, because that's where you have to build those muscles back, where you can figure out how to deal with your own moods and not feel like something's missing from you that you need to medicate yourself, right?
Right. When I was called into Broward to look at those 5 suicide deaths in their facilities, I looked for common factors. And what I found was all of them had just come out of detox within the jail system there, through medical detox there, which they do quite well. They provided all the care, and then 2 to 3 days later, they were gone. They had taken their lives, right? So I embarked on a study at that point with a couple of colleagues to help me, and we used about 3 large South Florida jail systems. And we looked at 430 patients that come into these jails, enter these jails. And what we found in those patients was the ones that came in under the influence or with a known history of opiate abuse or misuse, as it's termed now, were far more likely to do one of the following things. 1, discount their use, meaning they not admit to it. 2, they were scored on the entry tools of biopsychosocial examinations. They scored pretty low on all areas.
Can you explain these tools a little bit to the listeners? Just because I don't really know.
These are mental status exams that are given to everyone that enters these facilities to check if they have a history of mental illness. If they do have mental illness, do they have a history of treatment? What treatment worked? Family history, if it's available. and we go through a full biopsychosocial tool to get a good understanding of who is this person coming in so they can be treated, housed correctly, treated correctly. Are they a suicidal risk at this point? Do they need detox, and so on? Okay. So we find that as they come in there, many of those folks in particular, like Sam, with that same demographic, that same history, would come in of the sample study, and most of them would not really meet the criteria for a diagnosis of any mental illness based on their self-report coming into the facility. But once they finish detox, their propensity to meet the diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder doubled. So let's understand that. That means after they're detoxed, after the opiate issue and the perceived dangers of the opiate detox are over, that's when re-interviewing them was important, because then we find out that they probably met the criteria for major depressive disorder at that point.
Right.
All right, not before. Now, the standing modus...
Before, they're just trying to just get through the night and just
hold it together.
Yeah, just keep it together.
And so you can't trust that initial exam completely. In these cases, 430 of them, we found that the propensity to meet the criteria for major depressive disorder doubled after detox. Now, what does that mean? It means that typically when people in those facilities finished detoxing, they were checked for orientation. Are you oriented, time, person, place? Yeah. Are they able to speak? Yes. Are they coherent? Yes. How they feel? Fine. Okay, now you can move them to general population. What we found was there was a secondary detox, so to speak. I'm using that word loosely, an emotional detox. And those people required an education that you're about to hit a depression that you may not feel like you can withstand. You're about to have some emotions that are going to be so strong that you could seriously want to harm yourself or something like that. Or relapse. But you're in the jail, so if you can't relapse, what might you do? You might harm yourself. So we found that those 5 deaths in those facilities, in that same system in Broward, we found that those all happened within a 14-month period, which is a lot. Okay. We entered the idea of re-examining them after detox. Just because they're showered up, cleaned up, and no longer yelling, screaming, vomiting, doesn't mean they're well, doesn't mean they're better. Re-examine them, educate them on what they're about to feel and what they're about to go through. They didn't have another suicide post-detox for around 5 years after we implemented that.
Wow, that's incredible.
Based on that study.
That is really something else.
Which we presented nationally to the National Commission on Correctional
Is that
Healthcare.
The standard now?
It pretty much is the standard.
That's incredible.
And so what we found was, I love it when something it's good science, but it's also common sense.
Yeah,
too,
it's measurable, but you're like, why did we not do this before?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, here we are in the public sector with Sam, and they didn't have those kind of studies. Not that they would even look at it because it was done in a different setting, but also they were following their protocols. Well, Sam went through it. His family saw the results, just like the jails used to see the results and say, "Hey, he's looking good. How you feeling, Sam?" "Oh, I'm okay. I'm feeling better now." Yeah.
But he was not okay.
He was not okay. He had a secondary, severe emotional withdrawal, a depression, which he no longer had the tools in his toolbox to combat in a natural way. And they were so overpowering that within 2.5 days post-detox, Sam took his life.
Man.
So the lesson here is what? The lesson is that sometimes when people physically look better, sometimes they've ended the behaviors that you thought were the problem.
Right.
Okay. The real problem is still present. Addiction was not his problem, believe it or not. It was hard for them to get their head around. Addiction is a symptom of a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And the symptoms were opiate use, intravenous opiate use, benzodiazepine use.
Right, because substance abuse disorders, they don't exist in a vacuum. They come from something.
Yes.
They come from somewhere. People who are alcoholics, people who are addicted to drugs, you want to change the way that you feel in your brain immediately for some reason. There's a reason there. whether it be, a depression or just that you just need some more tools, you need to talk through some stuff with a therapist. There's always a root to this stuff. And that's why relapse is so common with a lot of people, because they kick the habit, but then the habit kicks them because they don't address the reason that they started it in the first place after they quit taking the substance.
Right. The habit, as we call it, is a behavior. The behavior takes place as a result of an underlying issue. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Who would choose to live on an overpass and put needles in your arm? Nobody would choose that. They choose it because it becomes necessary, because they don't have any other tools in the toolbox, and they've never addressed the real underlying issue. The addiction is the symptom. And so in this case, the family did their best to address the addiction. The treatment organization that would set up a plan for him, a plan that worked for many people, did not work for him because he was not able to withstand that post-detox depressive segment time to get to the other treatment part, the outpatient, the intensive outpatient. He was not able to bridge that well enough. And so before he even got to really getting into the next part, you have the medical detox, then you have the treatment to address what? Not just the addiction, but any underlying issues that could be that addiction was a result of. In this case, probably a number of things. Who knows? Could have been trauma, just like you said, could have been just an organic mental illness like major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, what have you. Nonetheless, he never got to that part because he didn't have the resilience to bridge from the medical detox to the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, he took his life. It was so hard for the family to understand that because he looked good and he sounded like Sam again, and because he had committed to treatment, that he was safe.
These things are never easy, but the fact that it looked like he was getting through to the other side must have made it just all that much worse.
I believe so, because they had struggled with his issues for years. They had gone out many nights looking for him. You can imagine as a parent driving around looking for your child that you raised. This is the same child that you had birthday parties and graduations and Little League games and proms and all the things that one expects through one's developmental lifetime. And then the end result was this person on an addiction path that ultimately cost his life.
Right. And, addiction is more than, it does so much harm to the people that surround them. They're doing harm to themselves, but, they become very adept liars, very good at hiding, oh, I'm going to the grocery store. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to the doctor's office today. I got to do this. I'm just going into the bathroom for a sec. All that stuff, it really eats away at trust, but people will never stop loving you.
No. And they truly loved him. And out of that love, they wanted answers. From those answers, they wanted somebody to hold responsible. Unfortunately, in this case, this was an act that was predictable. No one really likes to hear that word. But had he received some really intensive psychoeducation post-detox, had he been talked to hey, you may even feel suicidal, Sam, in the next few days. You may feel like this is just not going to work and that you could just really either relapse or take your life. And I venture to say he didn't relapse because he didn't want to let anybody down. You see, again, in our last episode, we had someone send in a question about why weren't we enough for the person who left us behind?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a prime example where Sam possibly felt like he was not enough, okay?
Yeah.
He didn't want to relapse and put them through that nightmare again, and he decided just to end it.
It's such a gray area because if he hadn't taken his own life, but the reason that he didn't continue down that road, that path of addiction, was guilt, I mean, if it works, right? It's kind of it's a weird situation. Like, what do you say then?
Well, you hit upon something there. I think last episode we talked about guilt and shame,
mm-hmm.
right? Here's an example of a person who's feeling overwhelmed and so overwhelmed that he feels he can't cope with it. Therefore, he feels shame about it. He already has guilt from what he's put his family through over all these years. So that's why he avoided them, lived out in the street instead of come home every night, right? Out of sight, out of mind, just let me be, they told me that many, many times when they would find him, he would say, why don't y'all just leave me alone? Just let me be, okay? It's my life. Just forget about me.
And if he didn't care, he wouldn't be trying to hide it at the same time.
Right.
It's because he knew he was doing something that was creating cognitive dissonance. He was acting against his own moral values, and he knew that.
Right. Because he was raised in a loving home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, his reasons for the addiction, the underlying, dynamics that may have sent him down that road, we won't know. I won't know. The family may know. I won't know that because I was not privy to that. But I do know that, as I said earlier, addiction is the symptom of the problem. It's not the problem. Unfortunately, its predominance as said symptom looks like it is the problem in and of itself.
Well, they've been calling. Yeah, well, I was sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say they've been calling alcoholism like a disease for many, many years, right?
Right.
Is it a disease like cancer or diabetes is a disease?
Well, studies show that there are dynamics in the brain in some people that predispose them to addiction and alcoholism. Alcohol affects people differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like any chemical, it's a chemical, ETOH, that affects the brain, obviously. If you've ever been around an intoxicated person, you know that they're not the same person when they're not intoxicated. But it runs in families, so there possibly could be a genetic factor there. What we do know, though, is gone unchecked over time, that it does change the brain. It does change the ability of our brain to handle certain cognitive duties, right?
Right.
Our frontal lobe is the brake system, right, to any impulse or all of our thought processes. And if that tissue, cells, neurochemistry, and all that goes with it is damaged in any way over time, well, obviously it's not going to function the same. Disease, that's not my area of expertise. That's nomenclature to me. I would say I like to keep things simple. I would say that if I've hurt my brain in any way, I can't expect my brain to function as intended.
Sure. I just wanted to ask about the disease thing because, like, what I think about sometimes when you hear alcoholism, and I know Sam doesn't really have anything to do with Sam necessarily, but I think it's an interesting point to make that when they call it a disease, I'm wondering, like, well, what if that, and you know how you say there's genetic predispositions. What if that's just the existence of the same mental disorder that's getting passed down?
That's a great point. I mean, this type of research is difficult. A lot of it is subjective. And when we try to nail it into a box of, can we do an MRI? Can we do a blood test?
There's the alcoholism right there. Right. It's that little light spot.
Right. That's not really happening. But we can look at imaging and other things post addiction to see what the results of that addiction may have done to the brain. But there's still ongoing research, and a lot of it's very promising. It's not really research I'm involved in, obviously, so I don't want to speak to its validity or its or its potential, but I think it's an important research.
Sure.
And should be continued.
Just a little sidebar there is all. I was, so Sam, his journey ended tragically.
Yes.
In this place where he was trying to make his life better, to try to make his family's life better, to get himself to a better place, basically, and it ended poorly for him. Going back to the actual results of the psychological autopsy, right?
The family's premise was, well, they gave him the wrong meds. Those meds were not going to be effective. The issue is they gave him an SSRI, a serum serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an antidepressant,
mm-hmm.
and they gave him an antipsychotic below therapeutic dose. The antipsychotic would have immediate effects. It's a fast-acting medication. The antidepressant could take 7-14 days, even more, to reach a therapeutic level in one's blood serum. So it wasn't a factor regarding his decision to end his life. I mean, the medicine was not a factor.
Right.
It did not push him in one direction or the other, though some meds have a side effect of suicidal thoughts. ironically, an antidepressant can cause depression.
How about that?
Yeah, how about that? Don't get me started on that.
Oh, I know. This would be a 2-hour episode.
But I can tell you that in this case, it wasn't a factor because it had not even reached what you would want to be a therapeutic level. It had only been 2 days. So it was not a real factor. The factor was that Sam needed a different kind of help immediately after detox. Okay. He needed a psychoeducation. He needed to be reassured. He needed to be, he needed some acknowledgement that, hey, you're going to feel really bad, Sam. You feel physically better, but you're going to have some depression that may be overwhelming, and we need to have a plan on how you're going to address that, what you're going to do about it, because you may not have the tools. He had none of that. He was left to himself, and obviously my thoughts are he didn't want to let anybody down. He had enough of that addictive life. He saw nothing but doom and gloom ahead. No bridge was given to the next level, and he took his life.
It is tragic.
So the lesson, the thing we're learning here today is that sometimes people look better physically. Sometimes we think what was the problem has been addressed.
You never know.
But it has not been.
Right. You never know what's going on inside of somebody's head. And I like what you were saying earlier about the fact that these are kind of standardized steps to take now after the initial withdrawal symptoms have kind of alleviated a little bit and they're out of the woods physically. How now there's standard systems in place to make sure the patient gets through that next part now, because this is an example of what we're trying to do here. Sam is no longer with us, but Sam and people like him, the way that their story ended, made a meaningful change to our systems that now are helping to save lives.
Well, that we certainly hope so. I think it's unfortunate that many times we learn our lessons through the loss of people we care about. Those 5 people in that jail system in Broward County in those days that were gone when I came about to do the study, they were somebody's family. I don't know. I don't remember their charges or what have you. I don't know if they were, despicable people in most people's eyes, or they were just somebody who had a DUI. I don't know, but I do know they were a part of somebody's life.
Of course.
And so understanding their etiology, understanding what led them to that decision is important. What we found out now is that once a person finishes detox, they need to be reassessed for suicide potential in particular. It used to be that they were only assessed for suicide potential upon entry or after maybe an attempt while they're in the jail. What we're saying now is you come out of detox, we have to reassess that all over again, along with psychoeducation. Now, I think that's true in the private sector. It should be a psychoeducation about the after effects of detox, what you're left with in your toolbox, and a plan should be in place to address that. And I'm pretty sure that most places do gather that now. But just in case, as family members are out there and your loved one's in a rehab or some type of facility to address their addiction, just make sure that when you choose one, they are employing the idea that post-detox immediately requires some education about what a person's going to feel next.
Great advice. And I think there's one more little lesson we can tie in here. It's obvious that Sam was presenting a little bit better at the time that he took his life. And it's an important reminder that you need to check on the strong friend sometimes,
Good point.
Depression doesn't present itself like a guy crying on the side of the Golden Gate Bridge, like you always say. It can be quiet, it can be loud, it can be angry, it can be defiant, it can be vindictive, it can be irritable. It presents in so many different ways that, like, whenever somebody deviates from their normal behavior at all, it's important to check in with them, That guy that always shows up, is always there, smiling, engaging, making everybody around them laugh. They can be in the most pain sometimes, because some of those things can be just how they deal with the pain, Right. There's a good example I wanted to talk about. Robin Williams. That was a man who self-medicated with substances, sure, but his biggest drug, his biggest vice was making other people laugh. And I think that he is a good testament as to why it's so important we keep in mind that not every single person we see who is the picture of health, the picture of strength, the picture of a vibrant personality, they're not always the ones that are holding it together the best.
Well, let's go back to one of our original questions that we pose to everyone who attends our podcast, and that is, what does a suicidal person look like?
Exactly.
We watch this incredible, talented entertainer entertain. We don't think of suicide.
A suicidal person looks like nothing and everything all at the same time.
Sure.
Well, we've got a couple more questions that I wanted to ask you today, Dana, if you'd be willing to answer some of these.
It'll be $5 each, please.
All righty. All right, you hear that, guys? I'll go ahead and put our Cash App link in the end of this.
Well, I need my tip jar right there. It looks a little empty.
Well, these again are coming from individuals who are very thoughtful and engaged with us in a very meaningful way on TikTok and Instagram and our other social media accounts. So this is the question. How can someone maintain the same outward personality while privately experiencing significant suicidal intent and making extensive preparations? Now, I didn't pick this one I just picked one randomly, but if that doesn't tie into everything we were just talking about, I don't know what does.
Sure. I mean, that's a great question, because the person asking that question is just like the rest of us. If something doesn't make sense, then we wonder, how can it be?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense to us because, we're not in their shoes. We're not in that person's shoes. It makes sense to the person, though. We cannot assign motive. Only they can understand their own motive. In cases where they can make preparations and put up this facade of stability and even happiness, if needed, is a testament to their willingness and desire to keep everybody else happy and not hurt anyone. Now, that sounds like, wait a minute, they're going to take their life. Of course they're going to hurt people. Well, that's not how they see it. They may feel it or see it. In most cases, sometimes there are vindictive suicides, believe it or not. It's very rare. But nonetheless, they may put up this front because they don't want your life disturbed. And that takes a tremendous amount of discipline. Mm-hmm. It takes a tremendous amount of caring. They may really care that much about those around them that they will go through great, efforts to hide that part of them. And add to that, mm-hmm. the stigma, again, people are so sick of me probably, but the stigma, again, attached to that same person coming to you and saying, I've been planning on taking my life. I've been planning on killing myself. Can you imagine the stigma that they may perceive they will receive for the rest of their life? An interview with a young man who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived a very famous incident. He was in a documentary that I recommend to all called The Bridge. A lot of people don't like that documentary, but I have my reasons. He said that one of the biggest regrets he has right now, he's so happy he lived, but one of the biggest regrets is that no one trusts him after that. He wished that people wouldn't walk on eggshells around him after that and treat him so differently now after that. He wished that people would just say, hey, what's going on, and go on with regular life. He said, but they don't. He said that everyone immediately and years following that event were walking on eggshells. People that can put up this front are operating on the premise that if I disclose this, no one will respect me again. Everyone might get hurt. And above all, no one will really understand anyway.
Yeah. And to add to that, being able to keep that veneer up, it's the belief that you're a liability to the people around you. So you would rather just not let them know you're struggling with that stuff just because it's easier. There's less friction there. And then you don't have all this judgment coming your way.
And this is really true with men quite a bit, is that we have an identity that we feel is our identity. It could be tied to our profession. It could be tied to how people perceive us, how people react to us. And when we chance losing that identity that we have grown accustomed to, that we enjoyed, we will go through a great efforts, extensive efforts rather, to make sure we don't lose that identity. And that identity is important. That's why many men, one of the largest demographics for suicide are men over the age of 65. They lose their profession. They lose part of their identity and who they are in this world. And going back to our original question and tying into the book you just described, we have people that will hold on to that identity at their own expense.
Absolutely. Excellent. All right. So if someone directly tells another person that they intend to die by suicide, what responsibilities does the person receiving that information have to act? And what can we reasonably say about accountability afterward?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of philosophical underpinnings here. People say, well, you have a right.
This is a really hard question.
Yeah, it is. I mean, many people believe, well, they have a right to do what they want to do. Who am I to interfere with that? And you know, it's not fair to ask me that question. I've spent my entire career trying to stop people from harming themselves. So what's my answer? Well, you got to do everything you can. You got to get in there, engage. You got to get in there and intervene. You got to talk to them. You got to let them know.
Make people uncomfortable sometimes.
You may have to make them uncomfortable. You may have to make them feel guilty about even thinking about it. If it keeps them alive, let's keep them alive first, and then we'll figure out the best course of action. But there is no course of action once they're gone.
Absolutely. And this is such a huge point of contention from all of the comments that we've gotten on our social media. The biggest thing is there is this massive gap between suicidality and institutionalization because people are so afraid of what happens once they're there. A lot of people think it's like going to jail. Sometimes you need clinical intervention. And yes, our systems are not perfect. There's not enough of them. But this is probably one of the biggest issues with the topic of suicide.
It absolutely is. And I dare say, guess what word I'm about to use?
Engage.
Nope.
Oh.
Stigma. Stigma has a lot to do with it. Again, you have this stain on you, right? I've been in a mental hospital.
Hold on. Let me say the word stigma so I can get the right answer, and I'll edit the rest out. No, I'm just kidding.
Stigma, okay. But it is. It's just we can't avoid that. It's so ingrained in us.
But that fear is real, though. There are some very unsavory experiences that people have had that other people have heard about.
I mean, the atrocities that took place at these formerly known asylums and so forth, and these huge state hospitals that were, all across America, they came about because they built those hospitals in the mid 1800s. Because before that, they put everybody in jail. They thought jail was the right place, in the 1800s. Then they built the hospitals as a call to stop the abuses of putting these people in jails. Then the hospitals became the focal point of abuse and neglect and other atrocities.
And now everybody's back in the jails.
And now they're back in the jail. You see, now that question was about, had a section about accountability. That's a personal measure, personal metric. I would feel accountable because I have studied this, to such an extent, but I would say that you're not accountable for others' decisions. You're accountable for your decision. If your decision is to intervene and try to help, though it may make the person mad, though it may make them, you may feel alienated from them. They may never talk to you again for intervening. Okay, well, you have to figure out a way to process that in the way that's best for you. I am on the side of intervening, and that's where I'll plant my flag.
Intervene,
but I don't say everyone can do that.
Right. Intervene, because then they're not going to be dead.
Right.
And then if the intervention causes you a lot of distress, seek mental health support.
Let's look at it this way. Let's say they want to end their life via suicide, and they have a reason, and that reason is substantial. There is, and now, okay, I'm going to take one piece of this out. I'm not including those persons who have terminal illnesses and have days to live. I'm talking about an otherwise healthy person.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a reason to take their life, and their reason is, to them is valid and makes sense. All right. And I say to myself, well, I'm not going to intervene because they have a reason, a good reason. I'm going to ask you right now, anyone who's thinking that way, can you please list for me good reasons that are going to make sense to those left behind? I have read hundreds of actual suicide notes in my career, and all they've ever done is leave more questions. They never answer the question because whatever reasons are presented in those notes, I guarantee you those left behind have answers for those reasons. Have answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And if this individual who asked this question is talking about legal accountability, well, we're not really, I don't know if it's appropriate for us to really talk about that here. You know, we have to consider our own, liability, and we can't, I don't really know how that works, honestly. You may know, Dana, but the long and short of it is, if you believe someone is struggling with suicidality, you need to do something about it if you have the ability to do so.
Some may disagree, and some people may even be angered by what I'm saying, but I'm going to stand by it. I am that person that says intervene in any way possible.
Right, because if you die by suicide, you never get to find out what your life could have become.
No.
You never get to.
Whatever the reason is, in my 36 years, I haven't found one that over time could not be mitigated in some form.
Absolutely. Well, the next question I've got here is, what kinds of support can help when suicidal thoughts keep returning despite someone repeatedly trying to redirect or manage them?
I'm going to, lot of opinions on this. So the question's coming to me, though. So I'm going to give my opinion. This is my opinion.
Sure. Just opinions.
I'm
lawyers.
entitled. Yes.
Just
I'm
letting you know.
entitled to my opinion.
Everything on this show is an opinion,
right,
unless stated otherwise.
This is not in any way a clinical direction to anyone out there. Okay. My opinion is that cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and so on is imperative in that struggle. We need to understand why we think what we think and how those thoughts affect our behaviors and decision making. It takes time. It can be intensive. It is well worth it with a strong therapist that understands and can use the modality of CBT or DBT in such a way that affects your thinking and thus your behavior and vice versa. That's my answer.
CBT is an absolute asset in this regard. And there's, again, we're going to go ahead and say stigma for the 50th time in this episode.
Stigma? I'm not familiar with that. What does that mean?
Well, stigma is when somebody thinks of the word therapy and they immediately envision a fainting couch and a 75-year-old woman standing over them judgmentally with a clipboard asking them, "And how does that make you feel?"
Or an old guy like me, and I would definitely have on a tweed jacket with elbow patches,
with your legs crossed,
and a pipe.
Yeah,
and I would be sitting in a easy chair, maybe even with my back to you, and using important clinical terms like oh yeah, yes, yeah. That's not it, folks.
Therapy comes in many different forms, and we're going to do a couple more questions. Then I'm going to give you some of those forms that it comes in that can be available to you, even if you do not have insurance or have the financial means to be able to afford traditional therapy. But here's our next question. What should someone do when they have disclosed suicidal thoughts and feel that nobody around them is taking them seriously?
Okay. One, I would say that you show great strength by disclosing them. Sometimes people face the what I call the Chicken Little syndrome, phenomena, where family or those who supposedly care about you refuse to believe that such a thing could happen, and therefore they don't take you seriously. Or possibly you have attempted in the past and they think, oh, it's just attention seeking. All of which are myths, all of which stink. Okay? I suggest that should that fail, that you immediately reach out to professionals. And Davis is going to share some avenues to find professional help with you now. But yes, sometimes the people closest to us are not equipped to, really understand this type of issue.
One more, and then I'll give those resources out here. But this one was worded to me in, I'm not going to lie, it was a little, I had to translate this one a little bit, but I think the bones were good. So this is the question. Why does society intervene when a person experiencing severe or chronic suffering believes that death is their only acceptable option? How do we think about suffering, autonomy, and suicide prevention at the same time?
Nemo insula est. No man is an island. There's my answer. We are all connected. As Jonathan Dunn said, Do not sense to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. We are all part of the whole. That is my opinion. That is my belief. And that is what drives my work. Why should we intervene? 1, because they are human. 2, because we can. And 3, because we are part of them.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think the original question, I wouldn't say it was bad faith, but I would say it was posed somewhat negatively, because the gist of it was like, if somebody wants to die, why don't we just let them? And my thought is, well, anybody who has ever taken their life by suicide, they haven't been in the right frame of mind, right?
Well, at least we can say, it's hard to say right, wrong. What we can say is that whatever they're facing, they feel unable to deal with that thing. And whatever that thing is, who knows? Somebody could show them how to deal with it. Typically there is an answer. Typically it may not be the answer they want, but there is an answer. Very few times in my experience other than some folks who may have a terminal illness and they're in tremendous pain and just days to live, other than instances like that, other folks are facing life without parole, things like that. These things can seem insurmountable from the outside, and I get it. And people should have autonomy, but it's just like when you commit somebody on, like what in Florida it's called a Baker Act, Georgia 1013. They're committed for an examination. Why? Because it's believed they don't have the ability to make a good decision for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So what if this person who's expressing suicidal thoughts and desires is not really able to mitigate an issue that could be mitigated? Should we let them go and then say later, oh, we could have fixed that?
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if we could have helped because they're gone now.
It's not acceptable to look at someone who took their own life and be like, well, they wanted to die. That's just it's never going to be acceptable.
I'll say that it's not acceptable to me. I cannot tell people how to think, and I know you feel the same way.
Yeah, that's, again, my opinion.
This is an opinion podcast, but it's based on a lot of experience. And I will tell you that there's a lot of folks who will disagree with this. But I say we all have something in us that's worth it. And if we don't even make an effort, how will we know it's worth it?
Exactly. Because your timeline ends right there if you take your own life.
That is all.
Well, if you do feel like that pressure has been building up and things feel insurmountable, and you feel like you just can't visualize or realize that tomorrow that's better for you, I want you to do me a favor and call 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Just call or text 988. You can also chat online at 988lifeline.org. If you feel that you need mental health support, and good on you if you do, it takes a lot of strength to admit that, but if you do and you're struggling with finances, Google these terms: Community Mental Health Center near me, Federally Qualified Health Center near me, Sliding Scale Therapist near me. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention here. If you do have insurance, look on the back of your card, call the number, and just tell the operator, I'm looking for an in-network mental health provider. Can you help me find one? There's excellent resources on Teledoc and online. Lots of friction reduction, where if you're dealing with depression, everything feels like there's a lot of friction surrounding it. So the easier, the better. Go online, type into Google. Someone will be there for you. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We just want to remind you all to stay present, stay engaged, and stay alive.
Thank you.